Bart, ons gaan nou die amper sê ek die heidense taal, ek weet nie wat ons dit gaan noem nie, ons gaan nou oorslaan, want ek dink baie mense gaan wil die goeters in Engels wil hoor. We had the whole episode of Musi and his disappearance all over the newspapers. Everything is quiet down. Any new news on Musi?
Carl, no, obviously just offered my my assistance and well wishes to his parents as well. Obviously was very involved with contracting the player to the Lions, and as yet no new information. I know that the parents have involved a private investigator in the process at the moment, and we can only hope and pray for some quick news and positive news on getting Musi back into his family first and foremost, and back into the sporting system.
There's been a lot of gossip going around the reason why he left the Cheetahs game before the game and disappeared. The most obvious one is that his contract at the Lions was not extended, and that obviously was a big disappointment to Musi. But Musi is not alone in that. The Bulls has cancelled 42 contracts now, the 31st of October. My question or my worry is, what support are there for these kids? Because obviously if you contracted at the Bulls, if you contracted at the Lions, you see yourself as a possible, and especially Musi's situation, as a possible future star. And suddenly it's just everything is gone. It's cancelled. So what support is there at the unions for these kids when they cancel their contracts?
Carl, one has to say that I think within the financial restraints of the unions in South Africa, they do offer assistance as far as possible, and the question mark is the as far as possible, because we all know that having mental and physical assistance available to players throughout from A to Z is very difficult. All unions have access to let's call it mental coaches or psychologists, sports psychologists, etc., all with different angles, and unfortunately one has to say that these are very expensive services, and these services are mostly available to your frontline players and to your frontline team, which is normally your flagship, your Currie Cup or Super Rugby team of the union, and that is where most of the time and intensity and money would go into. We do have structures like My Players, of which players can be part of, that's got a support system. We know those support systems are valuable, but are they really assisting where we need assistance when we've got an issue like this? And to answer my own question, I don't think across the board there's enough assistance. I don't think there's enough assistance when a player loses his contract or contract's not extended or renewed, and that goes at all levels. And I say it against the background of the fact that unions do try and provide assistance to players in a mental capacity, but definitely I don't think there's enough assistance. To mention an example, through My Players, which is fantastic, you have access to psychological assistance for a player if he needs it. But that assistance would only go as far as 1 or 2 initial sessions. Then thereafter, when specialized needs kick in, the player must be able to foot the ball, him and or his parents or whichever people can assist him in the background. If not, he will not be able to continue with that service. So And if we look back at instances, serious instances of players that's not been able to handle this massive pressure of the professional sporting environment. It's not even players losing their contracts. It's just players finishing their careers that battles to handle this mentally. And I don't think that the industry is really doing enough to assist them, let alone very prominent youngsters like Muzi, and he's not the only one, and the Lions are not the only union that's got that same problem. I think we've got a huge a void of creating a proper backup system to assisting players like this, where the expectations are massive.
And I think, and Ragas is also guilty to this. You build up these young boys to small gods. Muzi was SA Schools vice captain with Adrian Alberts. So you build up this kid, and obviously he wants to believe that he's the next world star. And then suddenly, you just don't renew his contract. And I mean, this kid must see himself as a complete failure in the hopes that he had, his family had, a support system had, and everything. The new regulations say you must notify if you're not going to cancel a guy's contract for 6 months. Do you think it will make a difference?
It's a step in the right direction, Cole, that a player is informed in advance and with a sort of a longer warning period. But still, like I say, this often becomes life-changing decisions that's made, and even though he's got some time to work through it, Daniel Wickerman was a very good example of a very, very successful player right up to the highest level in the sport. But just retiring from the sport and then even being successful as a post-rugby person, that immense difference from the mental expectations from professional sport and out of it was just too much for him, and that's why I say I think we underestimate the value of assistance at this level for young players where there's immense expectations. And we've got to understand and we've got to accept it. In South Africa, we've got a different model, Carl, and our model creates new problems. It creates opportunities, but it creates new problems. We've got a model whereby we've got a transformation system, which we all back and understand, but the fact of the matter is it creates new pressures. It creates pressure that actually multiplies in certain circumstances where a player is thrust into a situation as a youngster, and I'm not saying this is what happened to Muzi. I'm just saying there's been similar instances over the years that I've experienced, and some of the players handle it better. Some of the players have a great backup system where they could have handled it better. Some of the players had wonderful support at their unions, but every player is different. So you cannot handle everyone the same and hope to think that, okay, now you're out of a contract, or now the expectation exceeds what you can mentally handle, and sort of handle everyone as a model in the same way. You cannot do that. I just don't know if we have the capacity. It will have a huge financial implication, but you got to provide more specialized services to players in the professional sporting environment to be able to handle a lack of expectation or a realization of expectation or losing a contract, or even, and that's something that the Lions, for example, did very well. Last year they got a sports psychologist in to specifically handle, for example, players that was on the injury list, especially your long-term players, injuries, which was great because we often tend to forget how tough it becomes to those players. They lose their place in a team, they battle to get back, they battle with an injury that they don't get right. So that is something that the Lions did that I, for example, think very few other unions do. But the question still remains. If we get back to our youngsters, to our young stars leaving school, even a year or two thereafter, I think there's a huge void in the way that we assist them.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the young players into account, for 2 or for 3 years, he's the superhero. He travels in first class and everything. And then suddenly, because they don't study, I'm under correction, but after Lions intake of 3 years ago, only 4 of those kids qualified. They graduated, or they're going to graduate at the end of the year. So, and at the Bulls, I mean, it's simple. You can't go and study because there's no time and all that kind of stuff. If you look at that list of that 42 players that was cancelled by, or the contract was not renewed by the Bulls, I think only 1 or 2 kids are still trying to get a degree. So after that, you're nothing, you're null. So either you must go and work at the cafe or something. The problem I have is the scouts, his agent, are they equipped? Or do they even care what happens to the kid afterwards? Because the kid is no value to him anymore.
Carl, I would certainly hope to think that whoever the scout and or agent or mentor is that's sitting behind a player and giving him direction, because remember there's many of them. There's many people like that having an influence, parents, family members, coaches at school, etc., over and above the agents coming in and then obviously providing totally a new dimension. I would like to think that people will not on purpose be that kind of person that the moment you can't be of any value to me, I'll lose interest in you. The bigger problem I see is that we've got brilliant young scouts and or agents that's out there in the market, very good youngsters. The problem that I do see is I don't think that they are equipped to handle psychological issues. And not that I want them to handle a psychological problem of a player. I don't think we are equipped, and I include myself being a major in psychology at varsity level and having coached at schoolboy level for 23 years, students and professional players. I still don't think I am equipped to handle psychological problems. But I do think that I have the experience behind myself to identify when we start picking up issues and to identify problematic situations. And that is where we lack. That is where scouts and agents at the moment lack. They're not being prepared to handle these issues the moment a player gets into a situation where he gets a long-term injury that might even be a career-ending injury, or a player that ends up in a situation with a 3-month contract notice. Even 6 months, it sounds like a lot, but in 6 months you're unlikely to find another contract in at another union. So I just don't think they are equipped. I don't think they are upskilled and uptrained properly to be able to direct a player to people that can provide specialist assistance.
Yeah, so Bart, I think from next week we're going to start concentrating on how do you plan your future? Where do you go to? What must your agent be able to do for you and everything? But I think a very big question we'll have to ask ourselves: what process do you start when you sign a kid to actually prepare him for not being a success as a rugby player? Because it is going to become, especially our black players, our coloured players, with the amount of pressure, and even white kids that come from a poor situation, that those kids have 10 times more pressure on them than your normal average white kid that comes from a proper school and that kind of stuff. I think one of the major questions the parents must ask, what support system does the agent or the union and everything bring for their kids to prepare their kids, not only when they're not, their contract is not renewed, but during the period of his contract also, because we've seen a lot of kids that just falls off the wagon.
Carl, I might be saying a very controversial and unpopular thing now, but parents and players need to understand that an agent coming to you, an agent approaching your kid and doing so at one of the popular festivals, or doing so while he's sitting at his hostel without his parents around, and walking into a room of a kid with a pair of free boots and tackies, and that eventually convinces the player that this is commitment from my agent. That, to me, is the biggest red flag, that you immediately should question whether my kid is signed with an agent for the right reasons. And I'm not saying that I've provided some of my players with free playing boots. The last thing that I will ever give a youngster, and if I lose players because of that, then sorry, then so be it. I will not approach a young player before he's earned his stripes with any free material. And unfortunately, I am fully aware, and I know that is the case, that some youngsters sign with agents because that is pressure that's placed on the youngster. And then you would have the ridiculous and totally unsavory situation that some of these agents would go back to a player once he gives an agent notice that he doesn't want to be with him anymore, and they would go back to that player and ask the player for his boots, or want the boots back that he's given the player. So to me, you mention it now, and we'll discuss it in the next program. You've got to question and ask the right questions once your kid signs with an agent. And what are those questions? Is what can you assist my kid with for the next 2 years? Not immediately. Not immediately keeping him happy with 2,000 Rand pair of boots or shoes. What can you do for my kid over the next 2 or 3 years? What is your plan with him? Where do you see him? So there's a much more comprehensive way of looking at it. And honestly, like I say, I might be very unpopular in what I'm saying now, but unfortunately, I do believe that too many youngsters, and remember, some of these kids are approached already once they hit 16, and they've been given boots for 2 years before they end school careers, and they feel sort of a emotional responsibility towards the agent to sign with that agent formally. And if that is the reason, it's for the wrong reason. I'm sorry to say, but that is the case. There's other questions you have to ask, and I hope to think that we will, in the next week or so, provide the questions to parents that they have to ask.
Yeah, agents are not my most popular people. I rate them more or less with referees these days. And I don't know, what's the Bijbel from the Kinderbijbel? What do you call that in English?
I think that's a general saying that people even understand in English.
Okay, so when the agent approaches you, treat him as the devil from the Kinderbijbel. But from next week, we'll have a weekly session with not only Bart. Bart is one of the best scouts, if not the best scout in South Africa of talent. If he tells you your kid will make it, you've got a 70-80% chance that he will. And this is not to badge the agents. It's just what we want to achieve with the next few programs is so that the parent and the kid can make informed decisions, not only of the agent, but of the union where they were going, of the university where they're going, and all that kind of stuff, so that by the about March, April, you must sign your contract, or otherwise you would have missed the bus, but that you can take informed decisions with the planning of your superstar. Thanks a lot.
For Stadio, a qualification isn't just a qualification. It's more students inspired to reimagine their possibilities. With 5 faculties, 10 campuses and over 50 accredited qualifications, undergraduate and postgraduate studies, contact, distance and blended learning, we're transforming higher education into something that's truly multi-faculty, multi-campus and multi-mode. Stadio, a new vision in higher education.